Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Geordie Guy, and I'm here today representing Electronic Frontiers Australia. EFA has, since 1994, represented the civil liberties of Australians online. We've done a lot of work, particularly in the area of censorship, and also have the general rights of Australians on the internet as part of our remit. The question about whether Australians believe that there is a sufficient threat to children online to warrant spending $44 million on their protection in today's economy, with the bushfires in Victoria and people fleeing their inland Queensland homes in boats, is a reasonably simple one. We do. I'll return to that in a second then. Richard advises that he's left aside the idea that there is a mandate for this. Electronic Frontiers Australia, myself and anti-censorship campaigners in general can't leave that aside just yet. In 2007, one part of one bullet point of one policy, of all the policies that the Australian Labor Party took to the election, mooted the idea of requiring ISPs to offer an internet connection free of iniquity. Assuming, of course, that those internet service providers could find time in their schedule telling potential customers that they can't service their area and acting as copyright police for content owners. Months later, that requirement to offer became a policy of mandating the raising of web content that is identified on a secret government list, which ranges from material that is or would be rated MA through to material that's rated X or RC. This is all including material of various types which can be purchased in any shop in Australia, viewed in any cinema, or purchased in the ACT and Northern Territory in the case of X material. You can even see some MA-rated material on free-to-air television. To our understanding, this list is governed by not much more than the latest recruits of the ACMA graduate intake scheme. It's not scrutinised in Parliament, it's not subject to judicial oversight, and there's no appeals process or any public knowledge about the list. It's exempt from freedom of information requests in response to Electronic Frontiers Australia having the temerity to approach the questioning of it. EFA asked what might be on a list of material that Australians are only permitted to view if it's on Channel 9 at 10 p.m, or if they walk into a shop in Yarralumla, how dare they? We change the law. Firebrands wax lyrical about illegal this and illegal that and wring their hands and say, won't somebody think of the children? We know that less than half of the 1,600 odd items on the ACMA blacklist are material that depict children offensively. It's obviously a fair assumption that of that there'll be a wedge of those which see children being the subject of unspeakable abuse. But experience with previously leaked blacklists from voluntarily filtering democracies, which are the only ones that exist at the moment, tell us that we still have fingers left on our second hand by the time we're done counting the instance of that type of material on the web. How can any of this be so? Jim Wallace from the Australian Christian Lobby compels us with the computing expertise expected of a military commander and a religious policy leader. Clive Hamilton lambasts Electronic Frontiers Australia as advocates of children openly viewing hardcore pornography and the degradation of women, creating straw men barely in time to call them the most extreme strands of libertarianism. Hetty Johnson, a child protection campaigner, terrifies us by telling us that 1 in 5 children are sexually abused, averaging the results of various studies that predate my very existence, let alone the issue at hand and the technology involved. Bernadette McMenamin said in an opinion piece in The Australian in January 2008 that there are estimations that 100,000 commercial child pornography websites exist, and there are more than 20,000 images of child pornography posted every week. That didn't mention that the 20,000 figure was merely images of children on Usenet, and the 100,000 website figure was published by the Christian Science Monitor 9 years ago with no citation. That statistic worked its way through the Canadian Mounted Police to Miss McMenamin's vernacular through a network of urban myth more complicated than the internet itself. But none of that matters. Child protection advocates, religious Don Quixotes and online civil liberties campaigners use the exact same maths to get to the exact same number at which we conclude there is a problem that they're spending any amount of money on. We have 4 fingers left on our first hand when we get to that number. So how do we address the problem that if even one website exists depicting a child being abused, that we ought to do everything we can to fix it? Do we throw the freedom baby out with the bathwater of rhetoric? Do we submit to a regime trusting this government, or the one after that, or the one after that, to maintain the integrity of a list of web content that Australian adults may not ever see? Is that the technological silver bullet in the haystack? We don't do that. We never do that. The silver bullet is a blank. What we do is we dismiss these deceitful histrionics that the internet is some honeypot of iniquity or some godless mirror of our innocuous utopian offline Australia. We compel the address of this through the exact same channels that we address illegality normally: murder, bank robberies, illegal drugs. The countenance to the drug trade is not to close down pharmacies. Online bank fraud is not stopped by putting an armed guard out the front of each branch. We don't police domestic violence by maintaining a 3-metre separation between spouses. The AFP's Child Sexual Exploitation Team, or OXIT, was to grow from 91 to 181. That's now been delayed. The funding was to increase substantially. It'll now increase by approximately $3 million less. The government insists on pretending it knows how to fix the problem, and the answer is no further education about how children should interact with other children and adults. No more police, no more investigations, no more arrests. What we should do, according to the department responsible for our digital economy, is abracadabra the MA dramas, the R action and the X erotica, as well as any images of children, away from the eyes of every Australian without recourse. And while we're there, slow the internet down to a flaccid crawl, trying to avoid offence to everybody. It can't be allowed to occur. As media professionals and technologists, we have a responsibility to address this in a calm, rational, reasoned manner and address the problems with online Australia in the same way that we address the problems with offline Australia.